Why on earth do we get to the point where we have to rescind these things, is my question. Look, clearly at the time, at the stadium, it was a farce. Common sense, to have a feel for the game. I think if that incident had happened in a Super Rugby game, we're playing on, no card. We're not here to enjoy it, we're here to endure it, and we're here
to win.
The enjoyment comes from playing at our best and delivering again and again and again.
DSPN is brought to you by Novus Glass, proud partner of the Special Olympics New Zealand. The Special Olympics NZ National Summer Games is in Otutahi this December. Across Aotearoa, New Zealand, athletes, clubs, volunteers and families are getting ready, training, supporting each other and celebrating as the flame of hope travels down the country. Text Novus to 3598 to support our athletes. That's NOVUS to 3598 to support our incredible athletes at the Special Olympics in Otutahi, Christchurch this December. Notice it, Novus it.
Welcome to the DSPN.
John Walker wins the 1,500 metres gold medal at the Olympic Games.
The All Blacks have won by 29 points tonight.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
DSPN Grand Slam Test number 2. Murrayfield, 100-year anniversary as well. We're playing the Jocks this coming weekend. I think it's the most successful ground the All Blacks have ever played at. Well, we haven't lost there, have we? Gregor Paul from New Zealand Herald. He's one of our finest rugby journalists, known for a couple of decades. We have each other, and a pleasure it is, my man, to have you on the show. Welcome.
Very happy to be here, Marty. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Tadhg Beirne and the rescinding of that red card. Absolute common sense. You agree?
Oh, why on earth do we get to the point where we have to rescind these things, is my question. Look, clearly at the time, at the stadium, it was a farce. In real time, you can see that Barrett he's either meant to be a decoy runner, or he certainly thought he was meant to be a decoy runner. He didn't even put his hands up to take the ball until Cam Roygaard threw it at him, and he threw it forward, by the way. Tadhg Beirne, who's a good dude, realizes he's going to have an impact with Bowden because he suddenly got the ball, and he tries to absorb the impact safely. And then he gets criticised for not wrapping his arms. If he'd stuck his arm out, it would have taken Barrett's head off. So he protects them both. He thinks he's done the right thing. Clearly a forward pass, mitigating circumstances. In my view, it's not even a penalty. I don't like the way rugby goes. Oh well, it's a yellow. It has to be a yellow card, and that's rubbish. If it has to be a yellow card, why? Why? Someone ran into him. He couldn't possibly have got out of the way. That it was a forward pass. It should just be scrum Ireland. That should have been the decision. We end up, thankfully we've got a 20-minute red card rule, which stopped that game turning into, a farce, which would have been incredible given what they were there to do. And look, it was painful listening to the referee. It was painful seeing the TMO upgrade it to a red card. Painful to see a good player denied the opportunity to play. And thank goodness it's not ideal for the player or for the test match that you do these things retrospectively, but at least we got the right outcome in the end.
We did. How do you change this system, though? Because I used the words common sense to start with, and it seems that every time we get one of these situations, and quite often with any kind of yellow or red card, that the common sense aspect just is lacking. And you've got really experienced people that are doing this and getting paid well to do this. So what is missing in this system? What piece is missing, Gregor?
Well, if you look at it carefully, Marty, you'll see different decisions made in different competitions. So if we go to Super Rugby, which is a New Zealand, Australia, Pacific competition, where the refereeing employer, if you like, has made a very firm decision that they have licensed their referees to apply common sense, to have a feel for the game. I think if that incident had happened in a Super Rugby game, a New Zealand or an Australian referee in that competition would have felt comfortable saying, that's an accidental collision, we're playing on, no card, no penalty, scrum, because their employer has licensed them to do that. And then when you notice we get into the test match environment, and World Rugby's refereeing boss, Joel Zouk, has a different feel for what he wants to see. So all of a sudden, these guys are under pressure to come up with different outcomes. And there's no leeway, or there's less license to use mitigating circumstances. So your man, Pierre Brousset, he will have been given 10 out of 10 by his bosses for that judgment call. If he'd made it in Super Rugby, he'd probably been given 4 out of 10 for that judgment call. So what we really need here is a unification of employer, which is something that's been brought up before, so that if every referee is under one employment contract to World Rugby, for example, and then are seconded out to Super Rugby or Six Nations or English Premiership or whichever part of the world they live in, so that you get that consistency of decision-making tournament-wide. When we come to test matches, they're all on the same page. They don't have to change the way that they referee, because you'll know, we'll see it in the next few weeks. Even New Zealand referees will make interpretations in the next couple of weeks that they wouldn't normally make if they were refereeing Super Rugby. That will be the problem, because they're then answering to a different person, and they've got to appease that person if they want to continue being afforded the right to referee test matches. So that's what's held over them. If you referee the wrong way, you don't get to keep doing it. So you have to conform to what that particular employer wants all the time.
Just as a stupid, dumb old fan, I wish that there was some uniformity in terms of like international test cricket, where you have an elite panel of umpires, or football where you have referees or whatever. And even we see it in rugby league, where Ashley Klein seems to be the number one referee, and then you have to graduate up into that panel. But that panel of however many, then they get to do all of the big games because they are the best referees, the best linos, and it doesn't matter where you come from, because I refuse to buy into any argument these days that there is a refereeing bias towards your own team. When you're a professional like they are, they can't afford that, and it's just so obvious if that's the case. And you can so to me, that would be the most sensible way of doing it. Were you on page with that?
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And also, you get to the point where it's about a unification of mindset as well, which I actually think that we've arrived. There's these old-fashioned, kind of outdated views that you come up to the north and they don't want a fast, open running game. They want to kick the ball. They want to slow everything down. It's just not true anymore. And if you look at where they're all aligned, I think England, I think Ireland, definitely Scotland, France, they want fast, open, aerobic rugby. That is their game these days. They've got the skill sets to do it. So if you look at that and go, well, the refereeing can then get alignment between Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. So they can all referee a game that facilitates, that kind of rugby. They don't need to be pedantic about who's doing what at the breakdown. They can loosen up. So I don't know why we can't get to that point. I think maybe 10 years ago, probably they weren't all on the same page, but they are now. So to your point, the unification that you're talking about, that would seem achievable, because I think every country would buy into it, because I think every country has also now reached the point where they've all had some kind of refereeing atrocity that they have suffered, that they're sick of it. And, it's one thing to, everyone loves it when, New Zealand get victimized by a referee or an unjust call because they were so good for so long. Everyone goes, it's a bit like the Crusaders, they got done in by the referee. I think we're all over that now, because everyone's been done in at some point. So they're all like, actually, it's not funny anymore. Let's get this right.
Yeah, and finally, just on this, you're turning on the TV, and this is a game that is trying to actually export itself to the world and actually get as many people that aren't normally rugby heads watching it and so forth. And so the word spectacle keeps coming up. And I think it's a really important word, that I want to turn on the TV and watch a great game. I don't want to be talking about this stuff. So I think what Beauden Barrett did was excellent. I think just great character of that guy. And obviously this is the stuff that we love seeing, and we don't kind of get told a lot about it. But there's obviously great friendship between these players and these teams, because they compete like hell on the field. But what he did, and I thought the outcome in the end was the best outcome, but I thought also what he did was excellent. It was just a really great thing for a man to do, I thought.
Yeah, again, agree with you. I think he was sort of faintly embarrassed for the game, for the occasion. He felt for a fellow professional who he's clearly got a bit of respect for and a bit of time for. And Beauden knows the game, and he would know better than anyone, what kind of time frame Tagburn had to react. So he would know that he basically, Beauden caught the ball as he impacted into Tag. So Beauden would be the best guy in the world to tell you that's not a just punishment for a guy that was clearly not trying to take part in that collision but had no option. He was sucked into the collision, because this is my argument, Marty. Like, all those people that have said, poor technique, or he should have lowered himself. Like, seriously, You get a
Look at how quick
biomechanic
it
expert onto that and say, what did you want him to do? What possibility did he have? What else could he have done? He can't evaporate. He's
No.
6'7" and 115 kilos. He can't just disappear and go, Bowden, I'm a ghost now. You can run through me. It's utter nonsense the way people try and use that. And it's another thing as well, when you see the size of these guys and speed of the game, all of that really matters, which is why Bowden is kind of the voice of common sense and saying he's probably sick of hearing all these ridiculous people, who don't know the first thing about the game or the realities of the speed, to go, look, you're going to unnecessarily cause a fellow pro who didn't really do anything wrong to miss out on the whole November series. If he'd been, if that hadn't been rescinded, that's what his punishment would be. You don't get to play. That's it. You're done for the autumn. And I thought Bowden handled that really well. He was generous without necessarily being critical of officialdom. He didn't suggest that they'd got it wrong. He just made it very clear that his sympathy lay where it did. And and good on him. I think he will have built a fair bit of respect between New Zealand and Ireland for doing that, or certainly between himself and Ireland for doing that. And and that's after Ireland took out two of his brothers, so it was a pretty good thing for him to have done.
I mean, all you got to do is watch that thing, and the first thing the guy does is goes like this, and that's an instant reaction. I don't want to be the impact, So Anyway, let's move on, because yourself being Scottish, and here you are in Edinburgh, and it's the occasion. It's the 100-year anniversary of Murrayfield. It's a beautiful old ground. It's just one of the best places to go and watch rugby in the world. There's always this talk about Scotland, about is this their time? And what are your thoughts on all of that before we even get into All Blacks selection? How are you feeling about it? I mean, the occasion is enormous, but is it really their time or not? Your time or not?
I'm 52, so I know far better than to ever buy into any narrative around Scotland that this is our time, because it never is our time. We are at our best when we come in as real underdogs. It's our natural mentality to not want to live up to expectation. It's the Celtic mindset that we're here to disrupt. So where I get uncomfortable is when Scotland start being billed, as a genuine threat, or this is the best opportunity they're ever going to have, because that doesn't suit our mindset at all. Now, I don't think the players will be buying into any of that, by the way. They will be realistic that they are meeting an All Black team that's certainly not a vintage team. Of all the teams that have come to Edinburgh over the last 30 years, I don't think I'd put this one particularly high up the order of where they would sit in terms of talent, ability, proven track record. No, I wouldn't say they're at the bottom, but they'd be somewhere just slightly below halfway, I think. Is it our time? Well, look, probability tells you that at some point, and it might not be in my lifetime, Scotland will beat New Zealand. Will it be this weekend? Probably not.
This All Black side, does it select itself in your mind? And this often happens in sport, doesn't it? You get an injury and somebody comes on the field and all of a sudden the combination looks great. And we saw that with the two locks, a brand new combination there. We saw this with the midfield. Maybe those changes might not have happened at all during this tour if injuries hadn't happened. But do you expect from what you saw, especially in that last 20 minutes against Ireland, that the selectors are going to lean towards those same players playing again?
Yeah, but both out of what they showed and what they did. So they've sort of earned the right to go again, but probably more out of necessity. When you start going through who's available and what positions, and then you weigh that against, despite the fact I said I don't think Scotland will win on Saturday, Scotland are clearly, despite it might not be one of the great New Zealand teams, but it's certainly one of the better Scotland teams that I've seen for a while. So that's where the optimism's sitting at the moment. This is a team that, they can certainly play a bit of football if they're given the chance to do it. The forward pack is a little bit, we're probably missing a couple of big bodies there to be truly competitive. So you weigh all that up and go, so I don't think there'll be a risk mindset within the All Blacks of thinking that this is the weekend that they're going to go crazy and start shuffling things around and throwing peripheral guys into the team. So there'd be a bit of everything. The fact that they finished the game particularly well, they'd have to balance that up against thinking, we for the first time in a while they got a real contribution out of the bench. So if you then use those guys who came off the bench to start, you've then got to go back and question, well, what are we going to get out of the bench then if we're using that bench to mostly start? So that would be the question that they would wonder. And I'm thinking here about guys like Wallace Satiti, who came off and he had a really genuine impact. He looked like he, was back to where he was this time last year, powerful.
Yeah, exactly right.
So do you start him, or do you say, actually, we'll keep him, we'll keep him on the bench because we want that 30 minutes of direct ball running that he's giving? So that's a question that they'd have to weigh up. Pretty much everywhere else, things like Quinn Tupaia, unless Tefanga Anuka, well, I clearly think that'll be the midfield they'll go with, because that would be the two best guys standing that they've got. I don't think they'll make too many other changes other than injury enforced. So Josh Lord will replace Scott Barrett, which he pretty much did last week because Barrett only managed a minute. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Probably not. I think they'll stick pretty heavily to the guys that started in Chicago, those that are still fit.
So if there's any debate at all, I suppose it might be around the loose forwards, Luckeye, but I mean, he was pretty strong. I thought he, and who comes on as extra lock cover then? Because or do they look at one of those loose forwards and think maybe Parker might fit that? Although, I'm not so sure.
Good question.
I mean, that's the one area, isn't it? Because without obviously, without Patrick and without Tupu Vai and now Scott Barrett, this is one area where all of a sudden, you're thinking, my God, are we really light? But those two boys, played so well, didn't they? So
they did.
It's really encouraging.
Yeah, look, they did, and I think that would encourage the selectors to think, well, look, they probably didn't want Josh Lord to play 78 minutes in Chicago, but he did, and he literally rose to the occasion. That's his skill, lineouts.
Mm-hmm.
But he was good. I had limited hope for him because I haven't really seen him play. He's been on and off with the Chiefs with injury. We haven't really seen him at this level. And I thought, jeepers, he's going to go 78 minutes here against a good Ireland team, seasoned internationals. And he fronted. He was really good. So I think they'll take a lot of confidence out of starting him. And then if you just extend that mindset a little bit and go, well, if you look, Josh Lord had to come off the bench and play, surpassed all expectation. Last year, Wallace Satiti, came in for an injured Ethan Blackadder. They probably a bit reluctant to do it, but they had no choice. Put him in there, surpassed expectation. Simon Parker, they've given him a go. I think he probably surpassed expectation when he first played. So every time, Leroy Carter, another guy that he's gone beyond what you'd expect.
Yep.
A guy in his first, second, third Test matches, he's been impressive. So I think they're now going, actually, do you know what? We've got Sam Darry with us. He's young, he's inexperienced, but so what? We're ready to trust him. We're ready to put him on the bench. And really, I think that they don't have anyone else. They can't put the guy that's coming from the All Blacks 15, whose name too many bangs on the head, so I can't remember. That's
Josh,
And of the potential, I don't think Simon Parker's a lock really at this level. I don't think they would try him as cover at this stage. I also got a look about him. He took a bang on the head during that game, and I just wonder if he's probably due a little bit. I know it's only one game into the tour, but I wonder if he just needs a bit of a freshen up, and they're a bit worried about, the thump he took on the head. So wouldn't surprise me if he's not even in the 23 this week, and they just give him the week off, because I think they'll want him back, ready, raring to go next week against England, where his size and shape will be important. So I think Sam Darry will be the third lock on the bench.
Gregor, when you talk about the impact off the bench, I mean, that was really pleasing to see, wasn't it? The first 60 minutes, I mean, we did a post-match immediately afterwards, and as much as I was delighted with the last 20 minutes, the first 60 minutes was such a worry. We just couldn't seem to get anything together. But obviously, we gassed them out over that period of time. And then that bench came on, and that's exactly what you want. I mean, Mackenzie this is the perfect place for him, I think. As you said, Wallace came on, was really good. Tamaiti came on and was massive, wasn't he? And then Cortez just simply had to do what he does without having to do anything too explosive or anything, too out of the ordinary, because Roygaard had already set us up so nicely as well. So that again was really encouraging, that bench, and I totally agree with you. If it's, you've almost got two teams, 15 and an 8, and that 8 is so important, as South Africa have shown us. So if you can get some kind of regularity and conformity to that bench and consistency with that bench, maybe that helps as well.
Yeah, look, it does, and I think one of the other key aspects is I think one of the weaknesses of this sort of reasonably inexperienced coaching group at this level is I don't think they've had a good strategy around when to unleash the bench. That's been a bigger issue. I mean, clearly it's been an issue finding the depth of talent and setting it up with the right people. That's a separate issue. But even in certain games, I've wondered if they've often operated to kind of premeditated mandate, where they've written down, change halfback 65 minutes, move midfield in. I don't know if they have or if they haven't. It just sometimes feel that they've not instinctively read when, like they've come in with a plan and they've not been willing to budge necessarily. I thought we saw something critical. You talked about Cam Roigard. Look, if you've got a halfback of his quality who and his aerobic capacity who actually can go that deep into the game, and he scored a try, an amazing solo try 3 minutes before the end of the game. So clearly he was still, operating at 100%. Don't take them off. Like, don't work to the pattern, he's played 60 minutes, he must be tired, let's make the change because that's what we do. So I thought that was an important step that they were prepared to keep him on the field the way that they did. I thought they took Parker off quite early because he'd obviously taken a bang. He'd passed his HIA, but sometimes if guys have had a head knock, despite the fact they've passed an HIA, they don't get back into the game as well as they should. And he looked like he was struggling, so they read that well. They took him off, and they injected McKenzie. I would have probably put McKenzie on a little bit earlier again, but they probably just about got that timing right. So that is important, knowing how and when to inject these guys. But there was a secondary component to this where it almost looked, I don't know if it was a conscious decision or just the way the game developed or the fact that they had so many young, inexperienced guys on the field, but they almost seemed to go, you know what, whatever our prescribed attack pattern is supposed to look like in this area of the field, we are actually just going to move the ball as quickly as we can to Fanganuku, to Caleb Clark, and get those guys on the edge of the field to go forward, because they were having such, making great mileage when they did that. They were bouncing Ireland defenders out of the way, and they were really damaging Ireland's defence on both left and right edge. That freed up a bit of space in the middle for them to come back and punch again. So it looked like they kind of just trusted their instinctive ability to pass, catch, and run, and not really worry too much about attacking shape. And for the first time in a long time, we actually just saw that natural ball playing ability that Kiwi players tend to have, where, Josh Lord, young guy, but he just naturally looked comfortable. His big arms stick out, the ball flips out his hand. There's an ease with the way Kiwis move the ball. When they're in that zone, they're still, to me, the best team in the world at exploiting space, because you wear number one, Tamaiti Williams, so comfortable on the ball. Samasoni Takeaho, again, another one. Everyone in the New Zealand team is really comfortable with pass and catch when they're confident and they just play without thinking about what they're supposed to do. And I think we saw that. And you kind of wonder, how do we get to that point? Again, you can't just sort of turn up and play like that, because Test rugby doesn't allow you to do that. You've got to sort of break teams down before you can do it. But if they can get back into that way of playing, having dented Scotland on Saturday, if they can beat them up a little bit for 40 minutes, I think they can get back to that kind of instinctive, creative, free-flowing rugby. I mean, you'll have sat through the sort of Steve Hansen era teams when they got going and they just played. I mean, they were unstoppable. They were lethal. And that's where I think this team needs to try to get back to.
Especially in the last 20 minutes. A couple little quick questions and we'll let you go. And thank you so much for your time as always, mate. I really appreciate it. So how do we've spent a whole year where I kind of feel like it's a bit of a wave motion. We look really good in parts, and then the next game we kind of drop off. And we've had big drop-offs from Cordoba to Buenos Aires, big drop-offs from Eden Park against the South Africans to Wellington. And we almost had that again. We played really well in the second half in Perth, and then we're really, the word clunky's been used by the coaches, clunky in that first half. How do we start the game like we finished it in that last 20 minutes? How do we get that consistency which you want from our All Black sides, which is, that last 20 minutes, we get that for 2 or 3 matches in a row now, that intensity, that ability, that freedom of mind, all of that. How do we package that and don't turn up at Twickenham and kind of lay a turd for the first 40 minutes, or don't be flat against Scotland? I suppose the coaches want to know the answer to this as well.
Yeah, well, that is the holy grail of sport. But it is I think the secret of the All Blacks' success really is that ability to get back reasonably close to to top level every time they play. I mean, clearly the All Blacks don't play at the top level that they can every single game, but they get quite close to it, and that enables them to win as much as they have. I mean, that McCaw era, as I mentioned, that was their magic sauce, I guess, is that they knew how to, they beat England one week and they go, yay, that was a great performance. And then everyone would just be brought back down to earth. They'd rebuild, they'd start, they'd be, I mean, a lot of it's to do with the culture that you have internally. And, it's about recognizing, I mean, it's quite a joyless, and I think that McCaw era I think they enjoyed the moment when they won, but they didn't linger there for very long. They would win, yay, and then it was straight back down.
Yeah.
They'd have a team review that would be, Hansen would be brutal, pulling them apart, finding the tiniest things that they didn't get right. No one was allowed to wallow in the moment. No one was allowed to sort of think, "Wow, we've made it. That was the best performance." Everything got ripped apart. Everything was shown to them. This is where you can improve. And McCall was, he was a single-minded guy that was very,
he's
very
driving
similar
it,
to Hansen. That, we're not here to enjoy it. We're here to endure it, and we're here
to win.
The enjoyment comes from playing at our best and delivering again and again and again. And he was relentless. And that culture pervaded that, he had a lot of senior guys around him. And, they'd smash themselves down. Then they'd rebuild during the week, get to the game in that zone of thinking, we haven't proven anything. Everything's on the line here. We need to play. We need to go back to ground zero and start again. And they kind of did. They kind of managed to just repeat. It's a hard thing to do. You need big personalities. You need driven individuals. You need a mindset that's never content with any performance, ever. Even when I remember, the All Blacks hammering France in the 2015 World Cup quarterfinal, one of the best All Black performances you've ever seen. And, again, once they got into the changing room or back into work on Monday, they weren't celebrating that. They weren't, look at us, how good were we? It was, this is what we didn't do. That's what went wrong. That needs to be fixed. And it might not make for a kind of pleasurable environments, but that was the key to it. And they coined the phrase being comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where we're going to live. We're going to live in this never satisfied zone. And it's a difficult thing, and we've got a younger generation now who maybe don't like being broken down by coaches. They maybe don't like those sort of toughness in the environment. They maybe like to enjoy the moment. They like to celebrate when they've won. They like to get praise. Maybe we've got a Gen Z that's at odds with a high-performance world where, you just need a bit of old school sort of teachers that we would have had back in our era and gone,
And look, I think, what you're talking about is you're talking about the Roy Keane, Sir Alex Ferguson thing. And, you look back on eras and they look back and they go, we won 13 titles in 21 years. That's because as soon as we won the title, the boss is saying, that's last year. We got to win it again. And they were relentless in their pursuit of that. And that's how you become that. And I think that, I totally agree with you. I think that that's an absolute, mentality thing. That's what the South Africans seem to have at the moment. And that's what we've got to try and get up to that level again of not being satisfied, because that's the only way you can win it. It's like look, Rafa Nadal was like that. The same thing. He won 14 French Opens like that, just never thinking that was good enough. It's got to be better next time. So we'll leave it with this. So you're back in Scotland. Every time you go and meet your old mates, I know that you took your nephew out for dinner. Did they mock your accent, mate? Did they go, God almighty, that twang you've got, pal? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I hate that. It's your fault. No, they're not too bad. They're not too bad. They let me off. It's been a long time on the other side of the world, so they're kind to me.
As I said, it's always a pleasure. We thank you so much for giving us so much time, mate. Looking forward to this weekend. Enjoy it, won't you?
I will do. My pleasure. Thanks, Marty.
A huge thank you to Novus Glass for sponsoring this episode of the DSPN and for being a proud partner of the Special Olympics NZ. This December, over 1,200 incredible athletes along with hundreds of volunteers, coaches and other support staff will be making their way to Christchurch for the Special Olympics NZ 2025 National Summer Games. Novus Glass is proud to be supporting something special, and you can help too by supporting the athletes if you text Novus to 3598. That's NOVUS 3598. Thanks again, Novus Glass, for supporting the DSPN. Windscreen crack or chip? Notice it? Novus it.
DSPN.